Other thing I want to hit on quickly before we move on to our Heisman, which I'm promising we will get to. USC, man. They're out of the college football playoff now. They lost to Utah. Utah has now beaten USC in 4 straight times. 4 straight times Utah has beaten USC. Bryson Barnes was out-dueling Caleb Williams in this one. I loved the quote Kyle Whittingham had where he was like, yeah, you know what? They have the reigning Heisman winner at quarterback, and we have a pig farmer at quarterback, and we'll take our guy any day of the week. Love that. But there's a main take that came out of that, Dalton, was that Caleb Williams, now that he's out of the Heisman race, now that he's out of the college football playoff race, he should sit out the rest of the season. That's what Emmanuel Acho said, and a lot of people were coming at him for saying that. What is your thoughts on that, on whether or not Caleb should just call it quits on the season and enter the NFL draft?
I get the argument for sure. I think because it's only one conference loss, he's not going to do that. They're going to try to win the the Pac-12 because they didn't even do it last year because they lost to Utah a second time. They're going to try to win the conference. One more loss would be interesting. Just because then it really puts them out of it. You know, when you talk about Oregon and Washington, Utah, and Oregon State, as a matter of fact, who's ahead of them too. One more loss would put him out of it. I think he's going to stay in there. The other thing is I don't know how much scouts and NFL teams are going to like walking away from your team in the middle of the season, right? Bowl games are one thing. Bowl games, unless you're in the playoffs, in the grand scheme, are meaningless unless you're trying to improve the draft stock. He almost certainly, I wouldn't think he would play in a bowl game, even if it was the Rose Bowl or something, or whichever one is in the rotation this year for them. I get the argument for sure. I don't think he's going to do it. I'm going to be honest, after he's really played 3 either mediocre or bad games in a row, if not 4, he may have something to prove coming through this adversity. I think you want to see a quarterback get through adversity, go through some hard times. If you bail when times get hard, I think you start to raise more questions than answers. I don't think he's going to sit unless things get really, really bad because I think now he's got something to prove coming. He wasn't horrible against Utah. He was just kind of normal. Yeah. But I think he's just got to punch through it and keep going.
Can you imagine if he sits out now after that Utah? That's the last taste of Caleb Williams in college football is the Notre Dame and Utah games. He's not going to do that. And I think, a lot of people were angry at Acho, and I kind of agree with him, man. It was like, this is like, for a lot of people, this is the pinnacle. For Caleb Williams, it's not. He's going to make the NFL. He's going to play in a lot of big games in the NFL. But to say, hey, the college football is just preparing you for the NFL, that's his main purpose, that's completely false, man. Completely false. Caleb Williams has a lot to play for right now. In our interview with him, all he cared about was this season. Every time I brought up the NFL draft, he was always like, listen, man, it's cool. And it is cool to be talked about in that way. And don't get me wrong, I'm very excited about that in the future. But all I care about right now is making the college football playoff. He said, he's like, I was brought to tears last year when I couldn't make the college football playoff. And now he was probably in the same boat this year, man. He cares about USC. He does. He cares about college football. And he's got a lot of stuff in the future for him. He's going to be an NFL number 1 overall pick probably. But he, like you said, he has something to prove right now. And they can still win the Pac-12, which would be a great thing for them. But I get sitting out for the bowl game. I do not understand quitting on your team at this point in the season when you got Washington, you got Oregon, you got UCLA on deck. You still have a lot to prove, man. And he could still prove, hey, I'm the guy in college football. And like you said before, too, this could be Acho was saying, you should make it a business decision for the NFL. NFL evaluators will be turned off by that, man. They will be look at that and say, when the going gets tough, he just quits. That's what he does. That's something that I think Drake May is kind of closing the gap for that number 1 overall pick. I don't think he is there just yet, but I think he's closing the gap. If Caleb Williams all of a sudden just calls it quits on the season, a lot of NFL teams might be like, I don't know if I want that guy leading my franchise, man. So I completely disagree with Acho. I think he's not going to sit out. I'd be shocked if he does. That's not the kind of guy that at least I got the impression of when I interviewed him. But yeah, man, it's tough for USC right now, but this is not a guy that's just going to call it quits on his teammates like that. He's not going to leave him out to dry when you have 3 of the biggest games left on your schedule.